Good morning. Welcome to this recorded sermon for Sunday, November 2nd, 2025. My name is Bob Malone, and I'm the pastor here at Mount Vernon Presbyterian Church in Alexandria, Virginia. On behalf of our entire church family, welcome. I invite you, wherever you are watching today, to get comfortable. Take a couple of deep cleansing breaths. Drop and roll back your shoulders as a way of opening your heart. And listen now to all that the Spirit is saying to you as I read a somewhat familiar passage from the 12th chapter of the New Testament book of Romans. I'll be reading verses 1 through 5. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers and sisters, on the basis of God's mercy, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable act of worship. Do not be conformed to this age, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. As many of you know, one of the things that Shan and I are most looking forward to in retirement is traveling. Selling our home and then spending 12 to 18 months overseas. So as we get ready to leave the States, we're having to get travel health insurance. And so several weeks ago now, I was speaking with someone from one of the companies that we are considering. And as we got talking about prices, he said, well, prices naturally go up the older you are because, the way deterioration sets in. I literally burst out laughing. He did apologize, but he was right. I'm still offended, but he was right. 2 weeks ago, I sat with Margaret Howard and Shirley Harbottle, 98 and 94, respectively, and still sharp as two tacks. And as I listened to them talk about their challenges, we laughed about how people don't really tell you about all that comes with growing old. Because while some in our congregation, Kay Wood specifically, like to put a nice spin on the process, it's really not a whole lot of fun. Nevertheless, old age is the fourth and final stage of life that we're going to look at in this series titled The Stages of Life and Faith. And I think it's an appropriate thing to do, particularly on this All Saints Sunday. It's more than important for us to pause and remember some of those older adults, many of whom are no longer with us, and to celebrate their presence in our lives. We certainly want to remember Frank Wallace and Robert Wilde, two of our own church members who passed away this past year, but I know there are others, other people who have touched your lives and who are no longer with us. What are their names? Call them to mind right now. If you'd like, even type them in to the comment section. Where would we be without those who came before us? Those who touched and helped shape not just our lives, but our faith. People who modeled for us what it means to be, as our scripture this morning says, transformed by the renewing of our minds. Because you see, in the end, This is what the final stage of life is all about. It's about transformation. While perhaps more than any other stage in life, old age is when we begin to face our mortality. Physically, perhaps because I'm moving into this stage myself, physically, this stage is harder for me than even adolescence. The bodily changes taking place as I age far exceed anything that happened to me when I was a teenager. Am I right? Hair growing in all the wrong places, things sagging like they've never sagged before, bones cracking and creaking like the old floorboards at Mount Vernon. And while I don't always want to admit it, there are mental changes taking place as well, primarily because more often than not, as we age, our brains truly do begin to shrink as blood flow decreases and things just begin to wear out. Last week at Trunk or Treat, a family showed up dressed as the Addams Family. And the little girl was as cute as ever. And so I said to her, "Oh, Tuesday, how I love your false eyelashes." And she just looked at me like I had two heads. Brad Smith burst out laughing. The little girl's dad thought that I was making a joke, and I could only wish that was the case. Now, if you don't know why that's funny, I would encourage you to Google the name of the Addams Family daughter. Times change, right? We cannot avoid it. And no facelift or tummy tuck, no Botox or Rogaine or collagen supplement is going to be able to stop the aging process. As soon as we are born, we begin the journey towards death. It's as simple as that. Dying is part of living. Last week, I mentioned the album Lead Me On by Amy Grant. And one of the songs on that album is If These Walls Could Speak. It was not written by Grant, but in fact has been recorded by several artists over the years. But regardless of who's singing it, while at first it may seem like just another song about lost love, it's really about all kinds of memories and regrets. It's a song about growing old and remembering, acknowledging joys and successes, but also failures and regrets. All the walls in the rooms of the house that is our life, they speak volumes about our journeys. And hopefully, during this final stage, those walls will speak about our giving ourselves permission to slow down a little bit, to focus on family and friendships, many of those things that far too many of us have perhaps neglected throughout our life, through all the previous stages. It's a time to enjoy some of the wisdom that we have accumulated over the years, and to hear those 6 important words, not just from God, but from any of those who have been part of our lives. Well done, good and faithful servant. I came across a poem this past week titled The Season of Letting Go by Shelley Johnson. And the poem is all about the beauty of autumn. But as I read it and reread it, I realized it could also easily be understood as speaking to this final stage of our lives. Listen to what she writes. It is the season of letting go. Green makes way for red and gold. Winds blow with fierce intention, and what once held strong now releases its grip on limb and bough. It is the season of slowing down, of remembering the bud and seed, of measured light, fading beams slanting across the changing rhythm of our days. It is the season of returning, falling back to the earth, to the life that quivered in summer breezes, to the energy that shone sun onto our upturned faces. Creator of all seasons, enfold us in the wisdom of letting go. Infuse us with the breath of peace. Guide us in the dance of returning as we rest and renew in this most holy season. It's beautiful. If you stop and really think about it, not depressing so much as a song about a healthy relinquishing, where the three previous stages of life, childhood, early adulthood, and midlife, are all about trust and loss, shame and guilt, intimacy and individuation, achievement and accomplishment, certainty and doubt. This final stage of life, at least according to 20th century German psychologist Erik Erikson, this final stage of life is all about endings. It's about integrity. It's about, as Sally Johnson says, letting go and slowing down. In similar fashion, 20th century Swiss psychologist Carl Jung speaks about the final stage of life as being one where individuals shift their focus from outward achievements to inner development. And that is key. It's a relinquishment of the temporal so that redemption might be experienced. Relinquishment for redemption. That is why I've termed this final stage of faith redemptive. It is the redemptive stage of faith. After spending time practicing the rituals of faith that often begin in childhood, and after deepening our relationships with a faith community, then, after wrestling with questions that are bound to arise as we grow and mature, and searching to satisfy the longings and inquisitive hearts and minds that inevitably grow within us, after all of that, we finally come to this final stage of faith, one which most people never experience. It's here where we finally begin to truly own what we believe. And when we do, redemption sets in. So, what exactly is redemption? This religious term that is often used so frequently. Several weeks ago, our men's group was trying to explain to Doug Smith what green stamps were and how they were redeemed, because Doug is the youngest member of our group and had never heard of green stamps before. How many of you remember green stamps? You exchanged them for something else, right? Something better. Well, theologically, redemption is also about an exchange. It's about transformation, like the one spoken of in Romans 12. It's about the salvation and the freedom that come when someone is delivered from one thing for something else, something better. It's about a movement, a shift in our lives, a new way of being in the world. And this is one of the most important aspects of this final stage of faith. Because what makes it truly redemptive is that it literally saves us from the arrogance of youth. That unwarranted and unhealthy pride that is so often found in the early stages of faith development. The kind that Scripture warns us against when it tells us not to think of ourselves more highly than we ought. It's the arrogance that believes my way is the only way, that my beliefs are right and yours, if they are different, well, they are wrong. It's the belief that my God is not your God, and that your God, well, your God isn't even a God. James Fowler calls this stage of faith the universalizing stage. And it is central. It is central to the life of a person who has truly matured in their walk with God. Central to it is the recognition that we need not fear someone else's beliefs, but rather we need to be willing to move toward them. That is an important mark of this stage of faith. Because that movement is not in any way a movement away from a person's own faith, but rather simply the recognition that in considering someone else's perspective, well, that might actually inform and even deepen our own. Ambiguity is not a vice. It is a virtue. People like Gandhi, Mother Teresa, they might easily fall into this stage of faith because they were able to develop a more content way of living in this world. They were able to relate to anyone and everyone without condescension. And they were also willing to challenge any concept or idea that ran contrary to the ways of justice and peace and wholeness that are central to a mature walk with God. Now, Fowler names this stage of faith the way he does, universalizing, because it recognizes and celebrates unity, the interconnectedness of all creation. Where people today, even people of faith, continue to struggle with the whole concept of globalization and the interdependency of the world, this supposedly woke concept that we're all part of one great big human family, this realization has actually been the mark of spiritual maturity and depth for generations. For ages, wise and mature people of faith have recognized the interconnectedness of creation. It's the realization that, as we read this morning, we are all members of one another. That's what Romans 12 is telling us. Like panentheism, wherein one comes to see that all that exists is in God, and that God exists in all that is. That, friends, that is the direction toward which the Spirit seeks to move us all. It is the message that in this final stage of faith, we are one with one another. And as we embrace this world view, we don't just try to live it out, but we are eager to share it with others. It's the message that we want to pass on to our children and our children's children, to all the children who are in our lives. Now, as you might expect, because this series has sought to link the stages of life and faith to the music of Amy Grant, I'm not sure any song has ever addressed this issue, at least for me, as well as a recent one written by Grant. Trees We'll Never See reminds us of the temporal nature of life, of our interconnectedness with all that is, and how our legacies really can last forever. It was released back in 2023. We will watch and listen to it when we gather in a couple of hours. But as has been the case for the last 3 weeks, when this sermon ends, I would encourage you to Google it and listen to it. Hear some of the most important phrases for us. How life is supposed to work. It's a beautiful design. It takes love and faith and grace, a little time. Ripples on the water. Send your soul on home. Statues fall and glory fades. Listen to the words. Friends, one of the most beautiful teachings of Protestantism is that we are all saints. Every one of us. All of us have lives that matter. And the more we come to understand the universality of life, and then live accordingly. In other words, as people who know that we are all connected, that every life matters and is important, that none of us are more deserving of anything than anyone else. The more we strive to live into this reality, the better our lives and the better this world will be. The stages of life will come and go without our being at all in control of the process. But when it comes to the stages of faith, much of the work of growing and maturing is ours. Yes, the Psalms make it clear that it is God who grows us, and that it is the Spirit who keeps moving us forward. But friends, we have a big part to play in that process. And so this morning, as we wrap up this series, let me simply encourage you to keep growing. Continue to seek out the spiritual food that the psalmist often speaks about. And don't be afraid to learn about other faiths or belief systems. Never become so rigidly adherent to your own that you think you have nothing to learn from anyone else. We are all connected. And it is in that connectedness that our minds are transformed and that our lives are ultimately redeemed. In the words of Amy Grant, it really is a beautiful design in which everything connects to everything. We're all sons and daughters, just ripples on the water, trying to make it matter until our time to leave. One day, they'll carve our name in stone, and send our souls on home. So until then, it's about praying for rain and pulling up the weeds. Planting trees we'll never see. Statues fall and glory fades, but 100-year-old oak tree still gives shade. So let's keep praying for rain and pulling up the weeds. Planting trees we'll never see. Friends, have a wonderful week. And I'll look forward to seeing you, as always, right back here next Sunday morning. Until then and always, peace.